Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to thank you for joining us for UMBC's inaugural GIS Now webinar series. I am Erwin Villiger, Director of UMBC's Masters of Professional Studies in GIS. We are launching this quarterly webinar program to provide insight to goings-on in the geospatial industry, to look at innovative new applications and technology, and to highlight topics that are relevant to GIS professionals. Our first topic in the series regarding geospatial metadata seems quite basic and perhaps quaint, but as you'll see, metadata is one of the principal components of any information system. With accurate and complete metadata, we can move on to quite wonderful applications of geospatial technologies. The Open Geospatial Consortium is the global organization established to develop information and technology standards to ensure interoperability across the geospatial industry. I'm very pleased to have the OGC's Director of Interoperability Programs, Dr. Nadine Alama, as our guest speaker today. She's presenting on advances in metadata usage with the Open Geospatial Consortium. Before I hand things over to Dr. Alame, however, I'd like to quickly go over UMBC's MPS in GIS program. The MPS in GIS is located in Rockville, Maryland at the universities at Shady Grove. It's an applied terminal master's degree and a graduate certificate focusing on the system side of GIS. For those intent on developing a thorough knowledge of GIS, developing new technologies, applications, web development, etc. And our fundamental goal is to develop well-rounded GIS professionals. Our program focuses on the technology of GIS implementation, spatial databases, geospatial web development, GIS application development, advanced analysis and visualization, and forward-leaning technologies such as spatially enabled web applications, location-based services, and spatially augmented reality, virtual reality. An example of that would be Google's new Google Goggles, which are going to be coming out in the not-too-distant future. Enough of that. If you'd like more information, you can come to our webpage at umbc.edu/GIS. We'll also be having a GIS information session on Wednesday, May 9th, and more information on that can also be found at our webpage. I'd like to now hand over the speaking role to Dr. Nadine Alame. She is the Director of Interoperability Programs at the Open Geospatial Consortium. You can go to their website at opengeospatial.org, and she'll be talking about advances in metadata usage with the Open Geospatial Consortium.
Thank you very much, Erwin, for this great introduction. I am now sharing my PowerPoint. Hopefully everybody can see it. Feel free to ask questions in the questions panel, and we'll do our best to respond to them. If not during, then definitely at the end of the webinar. I have to say it's my pleasure to be here today presenting to you via this webinar. It's such a great idea. We're always trying to be very supportive of the amazing program that Erwin has started, so really a pleasure to be here. As you can see, the title of my talk is Advances in Metadata Usage within the Open Geospatial Consortium, OGC. So it's not quite an introduction to metadata, but more how is metadata being used and how we're pushing the envelope within our geospatial community. As Erwin indicated, I'm the Director of Interoperability Programs at OGC. If you're not familiar with OGC, I'll give you a quick introduction, but suffice it, I guess, to say at this stage that I like to say that I am in the fun part of OGC. OGC is a standards development organization, And the interoperability programs are sort of rapid prototyping activities that take one or two or a few standards or candidate standards, and we run them through hands-on rapid prototyping activities to see if they meet the requirements of the community, if there's anything that needs to be changed, essentially to test and validate and evolve. These activities are very quick, usually 6 months, and you get a new version of the standard out of it, so it's a lot of fun. The objectives of this webinar today, as advertised earlier, we've got 4. The vital role of metadata, and more specifically geospatial metadata and cataloging in successful information system implementations. Why the emphasis on geospatial standards and standards development organizations such as the OGC, such as the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. What's the latest and greatest in metadata and cataloging, and some examples from the field, some of them as recent as just a couple of weeks ago. So I know metadata may be perceived as maybe a boring topic, but really there's a lot happening out there. So from my end, I think my major objective during this hour is not to end up with a room full of sleepy people. So I hope we can all achieve this. We'll try to make it as useful and as informative as we possibly can. So let's get to it. The agenda, pretty simple. We'll start with just a quick introduction to OGC, more to let you know about why I'm here and why this is valuable to the community. A couple new capabilities that I picked up that I thought would be of interest to anyone interested in metadata. A new revision to the ISO 19115 standard that's currently underway, and the geospatial extension of the Open Search protocol, the mainstream, if you want, Open Search protocol, and 5 examples from the field, from the Global Earth Observing System of Systems to WMO's information system, to the European framework, the infrastructure for spatial information for Europe, to a couple domain-specific metadata profiles, one in aviation and one in energy. So let's get to it. Why we're here, it's location, location, location. No, we're not real estate agents, but location is very important, as you can see, in so many domains. It's important for disaster management, disaster response. It's important in a variety of applications like, water resource management. Important for traffic information and routing. And needless to say, it's becoming increasingly visible, if you want, with this growth of mobile application development out there. So things from augmented reality, from geo-targeting of messages, of applications. It's just a whole new world, and location is at the middle of it. So as an organization, OGC at a glance, we are a not-for-profit standards development organization leading the development of these location-related standards or geospatial standards. You can see on the right-hand side the pie chart. We've got representation from the commercial industry, from governments, from research organizations, universities. So this means that all these organization types come together in a consensus open platform and try to agree on standards for the geospatial community. We are quite international. We're quite international, as you can see here. So these standards that come out are being used and are being developed in North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and increasingly actually in Latin America, South America, and the Middle East. So this is truly an international process, which is especially important, I think, for metadata. Example member organizations, which I hope you would recognize at least half of these on the screen. From the commercial side, you see system integrators interested in developing and using standards, from Northrop Grumman to Lockheed Martin to BAE. You see the product providers, Oracle, Intergraph, ERDAS, and I bet you also recognize the mainstream guys, if you want, from ESRI, from Google, from Microsoft, and IBM. So this says a lot about the value of standards for not just the geospatial community, but the information system community in general. On the government end of sides, we've got representations from, as you can see, primarily Europe and the US, but there's also Australia, you can see here on the list, India, Korea, of course, mentioned already Australia, and increasingly the Middle East, like the Abu Dhabi police. So this is a healthy mix of government organizations interested in supporting the standards process. I know we said we started with location, 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 but we also have to acknowledge that location is only part of information in general. And if we really want to advance useful standards that are used in, across communities, across countries, we have to work with other organizations and other partners. As you can see here, we refer to them as alliance partners. If we're using HTTP, if you're using web services, if we're using SOAP, if we're using open source, and so on, we have to reach out and collaborate with organizations that maintain and work on these areas of standardization. So you see here a list, should be quite familiar, from W3C to ISO to OMG to IEEE to OASIS and so on. So geospatial standards or location-based standards are not developed in a vacuum, essentially. The market is definitely picking up on the use of standards. The best way to see what standards are out there and who's using them, which products support them, is to go to this web page shown here on this page, hundreds of products implementing standards, with implementations worldwide in a variety of applications, just a few here mentioned. So why the uptake, essentially, of standards? I like this slide a lot. It says that standards are like parachutes. They work best when they're open. They're open. It means that anybody can influence them. Anybody can participate in the process, and then anybody can use them. And they protect you only if they're open. So why are these being used? On the left-hand side, you'll see just a couple of points of the value of standards in general, not just OGC, not just metadata. So mobilizing new capabilities, lowering lifecycle costs, encouraging market competition, and just enabling better sharing of information and services. On the right-hand side is a quick quote from the Google KML product manager. Google brought KML to the OGC process a few years ago, and the reason they did that is, as it states here, everyone has confidence that Google won't take advantage of the format or change it in a way that will harm the community if it's being essentially maintained in standards organizations such as the OGC, with the emphasis on the open part. So it won't be just Google influencing the direction of the standard, but it would be anyone who's a member of this community. This is a very powerful statement. If you're developing or if you're responsible for the development of a national spatial data infrastructure, a quote here from Australia, if you've got 1,000 organizations providing data and running their own systems, the only way you can bring it together without going crazy is by basing the solution on standards. Same thing here, emphasized by NASA. If you've got sensors all over the place and you're trying to put together sort of a common operating picture that involves input from all these sensors, the only sensible and feasible cost-effective way to do it is by basing the architecture on standards. When we talk about standards, just a quick thing, we're talking about web services standards. I hope you've heard at least of a couple that are listed on this slide. The Web Map Service, the Web Feature Service, the Web Coverage Service, and the Catalog Service, amongst others. We like to think of these as the dial tone of the geospatial web. Other types of standards, sensor web enablement standards. These include sensors like satellites, hence the earlier reference, for example, to NASA. They include UAVs. They include also, air quality sensors, water quality sensors, and so on, in situ type sensors in general. So how do you task the sensors, and how do you get observations back? We're talking about standards for information exchange. So how do you exchange information based on standards models? Example here is the city GML, so exchanging information about cities and actually even about buildings in a city. Exchanging information about aeronautical objects, like airports or runways, and the status, whether they're closed, they're open, they're under construction, is there any obstruction, and so on. Exchanging information about weather, so the humidity, the precipitation, hurricanes, tornadoes, and so on, again, in a standard fashion. And of course, definitely, last but not least for today, the geospatial metadata standards. There are, I think, a couple dominating ones and many, many profiles out there. The next two slides are actually straight extracts from a presentation by ESRI at the ESRI Federal User Conference last year. And this is my favorite here. From their perspective, so this is from the market leader, if you want, why is metadata so important? Maybe we can highlight a couple here. I like the one that says abstractions, geospatial data are imperfect. So because the data is imperfect, we need good enough, at least, representation and description of the data so that we know the assumptions, the limitations, any approximations that have been made, any simplifications that have been assumed, so that we know if the data is fit for use for our purposes. I like the part about the expanded use of geographic information. Geographic information is reusable by its very nature, especially these days, especially when, as you note here, the producer is not the user. So this data has to be described in a way for others to figure out if they can use it and how they can use it. Reuse of valuable geospatial resources is key, and metadata is super important to enable that. Metadata standards, again, I go back to my point that this is not quite the introduction to geospatial metadata, but I bet many on the phone have heard or have even used the next two standards, the FGDC metadata standard. As you can see here, quite simple at this level, but then when you drill into it, there are many, many, many aspects that essentially can be filled out to describe certain data sets or groups of data sets. Here we're only looking at the identification information, and it's pretty big. And the main standard for geospatial metadata, the famous ISO 19115. So this is the top level, essentially model, starting with metadata in the center of this graphic here. And then you can see identification information, so who collected the data and who is describing that data. The spatial representation, quite important for the spatial community, location. Data quality information, lineage, super important for certain applications. Where did the data come from and what happened to it? How was it processed and who did the processing? You get into application schema, maintenance information, portrayal. Constraint information is quite important. Who can use this data and who can't? Content information, distribution, can you get it via web services, and so on. So this is actually quite comprehensive, and we'll get into it a little bit more later when we look at the applications in different domains, because rarely is everything on this graph used for a particular domain, particular information system. So when we talk about metadata, metadata is usually served to the users via a catalog service. So you need to search essentially the metadata for the data that you're looking for. If you've got data or services or resources really, then as an organization that provides these resources, you can register them in a catalog service by essentially registering the metadata. And then users, on the other hand, can connect to a catalog service or catalog services in a federated environment, and then be able to search for the data that they're looking for. So this is only for the metadata. The data is served, is maintained elsewhere. This is just the description of the data. With respect to standards that support the cataloging side of things, and we can really not separate the catalog from the metadata, as you see here on the slide. We have the catalog service for the web as a standard for cataloging, and as you can see, there's, for example, an ISO 19119 metadata profile. There's a Z39.50 profile, and at the bottom of this list, an OpenSearch profile, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So this supports the publishing of information about data and then the discovery of data based on published metadata. I should really say the discovery of resources. It could be data or services or something else. So this is kind of the baseline. So starting from here, I wanted to highlight two new capabilities where we're pushing the envelope as a community. Pushing the envelope on the metadata description side and on the discovery cataloging side of things. So let's start with the ISO 19115. Yes, a news flash, ISO 19115 is being revised. I think this is a big deal for the community. So it's currently underway. I just looked up the schedule on the ISO website, and it says that this should be ready by November of 2012, and it will become an international standard during the first half of 2013. This is really great progress with such a mature standard like 19115. So two things. There's a major revision to the content information to better describe coverages. Coverages are these, multi-dimensional, temporal types of data, kind of the most complex types of data that we have. So this is great that we can now better describe them in this new revision of ISO 19115. And then there are many small changes throughout to improve the usability of the standard in general. So this is kind of a quick summary of a long presentation given at the end of March, so really like a couple of weeks ago or so, at the OGC Technical Committee meeting in Austin. The presentation was given by Dave Danko, who is the editor of this revision of the standard. So I just picked what the next 6 points to highlight. The content information, as I mentioned, more specifically for coverages, as you can see here, multiple dimensions and multiple names. Something that would be useful for everybody, a more powerful identification, better versioning, and better description of information. More metadata information. We get this complaint all the time, but now in this new revision, you'll be able to actually associate more than one type of date with each metadata record. So you'll be able to track the creation, the publication, the revision, and other types of dates for your data. More connections, so you can actually connect or kind of reference your data set or your data set groups or resources to other papers or user guides or dictionaries. This is a powerful concept here. And better capturing of data quality by linking it to ISO 19157 standard. So more robust and more uniform, if you want, data quality. Responsibilities is another area that we've gotten many complaints over the years as well. So now there's a new approach in this new revision that separates the roles from the contacts. So you'll be able to put together the list of contacts, and you can assign them different roles, and then you can reuse the contact information for different roles. This would make some people's lives easier. And last but not least, from an implementation perspective, ISO 19139, which is the XML implementation of the 19115 standard. So that one is also being revised to reflect those changes. And there's also some consideration of developing a JSON implementation, so not just XML implementation, which is great. Again, we are evolving. We are evolving with the industry in general. When XML came out, we've gotten 19139, and now JSON is out there for new developers, especially. So it's good to see, that there's a JSON implementation being considered. With respect to the question that has just popped up, is Esri partnering with OGC? So ESRI is actually a very active member of OGC, and they participate in many working groups, from mapping to features to definitely cataloging, and the metadata working group. So I would say even beyond partnering, Dave Danko is a leader in this area, and he's the chair of the metadata working group at OGC, and he's the editor of this ISO 19115 revision. So also provides great liaison with ISO, between OGC and ISO. The new revision also will help, I think, clarify at least how you develop or how you create a profile for your community or for your application based on this huge, humongous standard. So you'll see support for associations to new classes or ontology constructs. So this is acknowledging the growth of the semantic web. So you'll see that reflected to enable semantic applications, keyword disambiguation, resource descriptions, relationships. So that's also, I would say, a major change in this standard, and in the way we think about metadata in general. Moving on beyond this, pushing the envelope for the metadata standard, the international standard for metadata. Here's another interesting way of pushing the envelope on the querying and on the discovering, on the publication of search results. Here's OpenSearch. OpenSearch, just grabbed it from Google, the description, I think it's the best. It's a collection of technologies that allow publishing of search results in a format suitable for syndication and aggregation. So think RSS feeds, for instance. It's a way for websites, search engines, and so on to publish search results in a standard and accessible format. Really, OpenSearch is what enables you, if you look here on the right-hand side of the screen, it enables you to pick or to support this picking of which search engine you want, and then just typing some keywords and getting back the results that hopefully you were looking for. So quite a powerful concept and quite simple at the same time. So the Geospatial Extension allows you in the OpenSearch request to add some geospatial parameters. Here's a quick look at just a couple of examples. So now you can say, again, if you look at the simplicity of these URLs at the bottom of the screen, you can specify the bounding box by just saying bbbox equal this and that. This is all that long. You can specify a latitude, longitude, and then perhaps even a radius. So you can say, give me all the pizza places in this area, starting with the center of the circle and covering a certain radius. The beauty of this is the simplicity of it. This is geospatial going mainstream. This is geospatial standards going mainstream, which is, very powerful. Another thing to note here on this slide is the format of these simple URLs. So you get the information as an RSS feed, as a KML document, so you can open it directly in something like Google Earth, or in an atom format. So this is also going beyond getting the information as just a list or just a map. So there's more diversity to meet the needs of the worldwide community. So hopefully this was exciting. Not the usual, metadata stuff. ISO 19115 being revised, great for everybody. OpenSearch Geospatial Extension, geospatial going mainstream. More people essentially being able to discover your data sets, because now they can just use something as simple as OpenSearch to search for these data sets. This is super useful, I think, especially for the younger, if you want, the younger development community who grew up with iPhones and iPads and web services, and they just want something quick and simple. This is it. It's the same infrastructure, but to more users and available via standards. So in the remaining, I would say 10 or so minutes, let me give you some examples. This is not all in vacuum, and people are using this for operational information systems. They are relying on these standards to provide the functionality to their users. 5 that I picked up, really not in any order. So starting with the Global Earth Observing System of Systems, or GEOSS. So GEOSS is, as the name implies, it's a global system. There are Earth observing systems all over the world. If you think, all the data available through NASA and NOAA and EPA here in the U.S. and their counterparts in Europe and Australia and Asia. So the idea is especially with disasters these days being sort of, global phenomena, and the disaster response relying on global data sets. It's good to actually have this global information system that pulls all this data together to provide the decision makers with the information when they need it. So it's not pulling all the data in one system. This is just a system of systems. This is, again, another powerful concept. Meeting the need here described in the slide at the top of 9 societal benefit areas, from health, disasters, weather, energy, water, climate, agriculture, ecology, and biodiversity, all essentially requiring a mix of global data and local data to support decision making. So this GEOSS, system of systems, if you look at their architecture, and more specifically here the green bubble, the GEOSS common infrastructure, you'll see that the biggest part of this common infrastructure is the registries part. Registries, and behind the registries is metadata. So if you want to pull these systems together in a system of systems, you need a way to pull the metadata together in this global registry. You can search using a portal that's out there, and you can get a feel of, how the different organizations have described their data, and how you can actually get data from multiple organizations in just a simple view. All of this is enabled by something we refer to as the GEOSS Common Record. This is a GEOSS Common Metadata Record. So we're not dealing with data. Data stays, where it is. Even metadata stays in kind of local catalogs. What we're trying to do here is to pull one metadata record for, each data set or group of data sets to enable discovery across, systems, to enable this system of systems. So this is, at a higher level, a minimum set of metadata fields that allow for discovery and access across distributed organizations, specific Earth observation metadata. So I'm just looking at one question that just popped up regarding cloud computing in this instance. So I think these are two separate issues. So there's the standardization of the metadata, and then there's the actual deployment, which would be based on the cloud computing, technologies. So I think cloud computing enables, the deployment and, if you want, the rapid deployment and scalability of a system of systems. But the metadata being XML-based or standards-based, or even here based on this common record, is kind of at another level of the architecture. I hope this answers the question. So if we move on here, this common record for GEOSS, no surprises based on 19115. It has some emphasis on uncertainty, on data quality. You'll see also languages. And you can check it out. This is work in progress, definitely not finalized. You can check it out at this URL provided here. And this is, I have to point this out, this is also kind of a voluntary thing. No one is saying that everybody has to implement or provide their metadata this way. But if you'd like to be more easily discovered in the system of systems, this is a recommended common record. You will still be discovered even if you're not implementing this common record. It's just from a user perspective, it helps if the view that they get back about all the data resources that they were looking for, that they're described more or less in the same way at this very high system of systems level. Users are free to essentially follow the links and get more information about the data directly and get more metadata accordingly. Here's another example, another global example from the World Meteorological Organization, WMO. So WMO has this catalog, a data catalog to support their WMO information system, their WIS, W-I-S. So this data catalog, no surprises here. They keep track of global data, whether it's just your traditional geospatial data available, for example, via CDs and via downloads or via web services. And then you've got on the right-hand side the specialized data. This could be specialized local data or a program-specific data or a domain-specific data. And you have this overarching data catalog essentially providing the view of everything to the user who's looking to discover data by coming to this WMO information system. Again, no surprises here. ISO is too big. They're developing their own metadata profile. ISO has like 400 and plus elements. Only a few are mandatory. The ISO core has very few. It has only 14 elements. So they picked somewhere in between. They came up with 40 mandatory elements in their profile. I love how they put this together. This is extracted from a presentation that their representative gave at the OGC Technical Committee meeting in March. So he said we went from this huge ISO 19115 to this simple profile for WMO core. And if you look at this closely, you'll see, they focused on identification, distribution, data quality, and of course, the geographic location part. So pretty simple at this level, at least. Something similar being done at the entire European level. So in SPIRE, which is the infrastructure for spatial information in Europe. So this is quite a challenge. They're building an infrastructure for Europe when they have 27 member states and several languages and several domains and several types of metadata. So how do you pull this together? They are essentially mandating what metadata should be published to be used in this SPIRE program and who publishes the metadata. They separate, this is a wonderful concept, they separate the metadata properties into those useful for discovery. So if you're looking for something, and for evaluation. So if you want to figure out if the data is fit for your use, and for use. So how do you use the data? This is a great, I think, way to categorize metadata and to actually separate the properties into these three different buckets. It also differentiates between the properties in the metadata that are useful for the non-specialists, say the general public, and the experts, people who know their stuff, who know their data quality parameters, who know information about, the satellite parameters and so on, where the data came from. From a domain perspective, in the aviation domain, so capturing aeronautical information, so this is information about airports and runways and towers. So the community is also working on metadata for aeronautical information. This is led by FAA in the US and Eurocontrol in Europe. They're working right now on requirements for metadata, so they're not even at the point where they can put together a profile. They have many sources of metadata for their information listed here. And the struggle is listing here 4 things: lineage, quality, validity, accuracy, and constraints. The length of the runway, for example, the error should be well noted because, the safety of the passenger and the successful landing of airplanes depends on the accuracy with which you've captured the length of the runway. So we're talking critical information here. So this relates to the accuracy of the numerical data. the quality and validity and the lineage. When data is in the system, you got to capture who put it there, and more importantly, if it was changed, who changed it, and the constraints related to that use with respect to, this is again critical information. Not everybody can have access to it, so you got to control that. And more importantly, not everybody can change it. So you have access control and use control information captured in the metadata. And my last example here is related to the energy community. Again, this is taken from a recent, as you can see here on the slide, a presentation by Energistics, which is the Energy Standards Resource Center in Europe. And they were talking about, I think, a problem we all face. 40% of their staff time is devoted to finding, retrieving, and verifying information, while the data volume is growing at 60 to 80% per year, and the need for integrating distributed diverse resources is increasing. This could be, I think, the title of this whole presentation. We need a more efficient way to find, retrieve, and verify information. That's why we need standards. All the while, the data is increasing, and the need to pull information from different resources is increasing. So it's a beautiful summary here. This is why we need to leverage existing standards, to encourage their adoption, and to exploit community resources, not just our own community, but across communities. So this is the problem. This is their solution. Leveraging existing metadata standards, again, ISO 19115 and some profiles, to deliver an energy industry profile. If you Google it, you'll find it out there. They went from the ISO to a 125-page specification document, still better than the whole thing. And once again, they picked what they thought was critical for their community: constraints, metadata identification, reference system, and distribution. Really not too different from our earlier example, actually. It's just a little bit more information. The best part about this is that they're already leveraging this new revision to ISO 19115 that we just heard about. So they're exploiting the enhancements of the standard, mostly to support semantic applications. So this is beautiful, going from metadata to cataloging to semantic web. So this at least covers my end. I hope I gave you just a quick justification, at least, of why we're here and why standards are valuable. Talk to you about two new capabilities in this domain, the metadata standard itself, and then the open search capabilities, and some operational, real-life, very recent examples out there from the field using metadata and profiling it. And I hope this is not you right now, and if it's you, wake up. I think, Erwin, maybe I'll hand it back to you if you want to take some questions. But this is my contact information, and the website, any of the profiles and so on. I think they're all public information, so contact me essentially if you need more information about anything presented here. And thanks again for the opportunity to talk about this very exciting topic. This is one last opportunity to wake you up. Thanks again, Erwin, and everybody.
Hi, Nadine. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate you taking part in the presentation today and providing us a webinar. I do have a number of questions. There were a couple that you answered during the course of the presentation, and actually I'd like to go back to one of them regarding cloud computing, just kind of in a general sense. I mean, there you were specifically talking about the system of systems, but could you speak for a minute on how cloud computing, or more specifically how OGC standards, frankly, impact or are related to the cloud computing environment?
So absolutely. So cloud computing seems to be the next best thing, and we're getting a lot of inquiries about it. Again, if you check out the OGC webpage, you'll see many recent presentations on what people are doing with standards in a cloud computing environment. I don't think I have an answer. We have actually a white paper that I'd be happy to distribute to the attendees, kind of essentially exploring, the answers to your question, Erwin. I don't think there's a definite answer. I know from the OGC perspective, we are just finishing the installation of the cloud computing environment so that we can test hands-on, what happens to our standards in that environment. I know other organizations such as NCOIC, which is the Net-Centric Operations Industry Consortium. They're also looking at, the exact same question. So all I can say is, very timely question. It's up to us, to this community, to work it out, and I was happy to see it highlighted in your program description actually earlier on. So just the fact that you're encouraging students in your program to think about it, and that we have the research and the government and the commercial industry looking at this exact problem right now with geospatial standards, is really, really great.
Another question, you talked about a couple of the profiles that have been developed out there. Where can interested parties go to get more information on profiles?
Actually, if people contact me, I can definitely get them that information. I think for some of them, they may be drafts, so definitely contact me, and I'll put you in touch with the right points of contact and see if they can share that information. If you are OGC members, you can just go under the portal, the OGC portal, and all the snippets of my presentation. You'll find them there. That's all I did. I just went to the recent meeting. I went to the metadata working group, essentially folder, and I looked at what people presented in terms of the latest and greatest on metadata, and this is where I came up with my top 5. So contact me or look at the OGC webpage, and we'll put you in touch with the right people who are developing the profiles.
Are there any organizations out there that are developing competing standards?
Definitely not competing. This is, with location just being out there, I think you'll see we're seeing more coordination, collaboration with what I mentioned earlier, alliance partners. So from OASIS to the W3C, definitely more coordination so that we can ensure that the geospatial is really integrated. They don't want to do the geospatial part. That's not their area of expertise. We don't want to do all the rest. We've done the geospatial, and we have been working with these other organizations to just help them essentially adopt what's needed for their domains. So I think we're seeing less competition and more collaboration because we're setting up the infrastructure. The competition is in the applications and in the products, but from a standards and infrastructure perspective, I think this is a great time for collaboration.
Now, you also talked about the update or the revision of the ISO 19115 standard. Is there a regular review of these standards, and are they fairly static, or are they living standards that get reviewed on a regular basis or more on an as-needed basis?
That's a very good question. I think it's both. The ISO process in general is known to be slow. It's not, you don't get a new revision every 3 months or every 6 months. So,
and one shouldn't. These are standards.
Exactly. But this is why we're excited about this revision of 19115. I think it's long overdue. But as you mentioned, this is truly international, so it does take some time to get everybody on board to issue a new revision. My understanding is that if there are no changes in the pipeline, that ISO still reviews their standards every 3 years. So you get at least, every 3 years. But, in certain areas, it's much faster than that. Within the OGC domain, if you go again to the OGC webpage, there's a link, right there on submitting change requests for any standard, and these feed into a working group, and then the working group determines the priorities, and then handles the change requests as they come in. You get a quick turnaround because it's, changes from the community, decided by the community, and if they're not of benefit to the entire community, then they just don't make it through. It's a consensus process after all. So consensus is great, but it's challenging and sometimes takes time.
A final question by one of the listeners was, how can one get involved with OGC standards?
So from the user perspective, OGC standards are free. You can just download them and use them. We have a lot of training material available. If you want to influence the direction of the standards, and I love this question. I'm so happy that you're asking it. It's great to hear that you want to help essentially guide us through the next generation of standards. It's as simple as joining the OGC, and then your voice is as powerful as anybody else in the organization. Once you're in, you're a member like everybody else. This is the true consensus process. So I invite you to join if you're not already, and if your organization is already a member, definitely get in touch with your representative so that they can hook you up with the right working groups, and so you can, voice your opinion and participate like everybody else.
Well, Nadine, I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. There were questions regarding the presentations and availability of information regarding the webinar. The video will be uploaded to YouTube and will be available via our GIS webpage within about 2 weeks, and we can send out a notice to everyone to that effect. In the meantime, if you have specific questions, you're welcome to direct them towards me or to our webpage again, and specific questions to Nadine. She shared her email, and she can answer any questions you have as well. With that, I'd like to wrap things up. I can say that it's been I think a valuable and learning experience, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. And stay tuned. We plan on hosting webinars about quarterly, I would expect, so we'll be looking to do another one sometime in mid to late summer. So thank you very much, and everyone, have a wonderful afternoon.